What's something you believed as a kid that you're now embarrassed even existed in your brain? That if we had a bigger TV, you'd be able to see boobs in shampoo commercials. Somehow I figured out Santa wasn't real on my own. When I asked my mom about it, she explained parents buy the gifts, but I misunderstood and heard parrots. I legitimately believed parrots somehow brought Christmas gifts to the house for a while. My dad told me that the ball boys in tennis are opens, and when they hit 16 they get taken out and shot before being replaced. I was terrified for a few years that if my parents died then that would be my fate. That they started filming movies with flashbacks when the actors were kids, and finished them when they were older. I believed that cars wouldn't start unless everyone had their seatbelts on for way too long. Owned my own car before I realized it was just that my dad wouldn't turn on the car until I put mine on. I told him about it years later and he said it good. Study a lot to become rich. I really believed that true love happened spontaneously. Like you would be walking down the street and suddenly your true love would see you and bam. You would both instantly be in love forever. I thought white people had white poops. That adults know everything. Some of us really don't lol. That the powder that comes off of butterfly wings acted as a sort of pixie dust, that it's what made them fly. Another is that I thought it was the Aran Space Museum, which was a common field trip for schools in the area. I was always like, who the heck is Aran Space? And what is the museum about? Air and space, it was the Air and Space Museum. Cars told my mom which way to turn. Dad instinctively knew. Turns out Dad's allergic to using signals, and Mom's the smart one. That the world was in black-white before color was invented. I thought the saying was a making ends meet. As in having enough money to buy meat at the end of every week. I believed this until I was 33 years old. That if you picked your nose and ate your boogers that they would stay in your stomach. Then when you had a baby and the doctor cut the baby out, that is how I thought babies came out when I was little, that they would be covered in all the boogers you ate and the doctor would know you were a booger eater. I didn't know my mother was an alcoholic because she was a fun wine mom into fun wine mom culture. Cops taught us how to identify drugs from a suitcase, and I watched the cartoon that told me the tripping balls on LSD would be amazing, and I learned all about how I was being abused at home, but I didn't know my mother was an alcoholic because somebody decided that a fun wine mommy would be a great way to sell a bunch of nonsense to alcoholic women in denial, and everybody else just pretends that's not what's happening. Like a daily drinking habit isn't still a daily drinking habit when you put a cursive font on it with some clip art. That blood was blue until it touched oxygen. I actually just found out about 3 years ago that that wasn't true. I was taught it in school. A lot of people around my age 45 were taught that, and I don't understand why, but it really made me feel really stupid. I genuinely thought that if you swallowed a watermelon seed, a watermelon would grow in your stomach. I avoided watermelon for an entire summer. An entire summer. My father is an immigrant from Finland. When I was little, I asked him to teach me some swear words in Finn. He told me there weren't any. I believed this until I was 30. One day to 2 friends I said, deadpan, apparently there aren't any swear words in Finn. My friends mercilessly made fun of me, and then taught me some Finnish swears. When I was very small, I overheard a conversation among adults about the equator. I asked what that was and heard it's a big lion that runs around the earth. Obviously what was said was a line, but small child me happily accepted the idea of a giant lion that ran constantly around the world. USA is the land of free. Wearing a baseball hat causes you to go bald. Because all of the men I knew who wore baseball hats all the time were bald underneath the hat. I thought when girls become teenagers were taken to some medical facility and given boobs. Surgically. I used to believe that the adults in charge could make long-term plans that would guide our nation wisely. I believed that everyone thought in English, no matter what language they spoke. It was quite an epiphany. My college roommate from Mexico found it hysterical. I realized when I was like 10, Not in college, just to clarify. Genuinely believed all dogs were male and all cats were female. Religion. I was so gullible until age 12. I had a tumor in my sinus cavity the size of an orange. After my mother relentlessly found a doctor who was well qualified for the surgery, she removed the tumor and I was fine. Even though my odds were 6,040 not in my favor, everyone in my family said their prayers were answered. It was my surgeon and her fantastic abilities that saved my life, not a prayer. There were a couple deer that would run across our yard at night. In the snow, they obviously left footprints. My mom told me that they were left by a leprechaun named Patty O'Furniture. It did not take long for me to stop believing that there was a leprechaun, but it did take me an embarrassingly long time to get the pun. If you sniffed a candle while it's burning, you could set your brain on fire. My mom told us dinosaurs weren't real. Yeah, I learned at a very young age that my mom was not smart. I thought my godmother was my fairy godmother. Every time something bad happened, I would look around to see if now was the moment she was most needed. Nope. I took the Viking Marslanders literally true. As in they took place hundreds of years ago by the Viking, and not in the 1970s. I thought when you bought groceries and the cashier gives you change back that the store used to pay you for buying groceries. That Asians, E.S.E., couldn't make facial expressions like white people. There was one Asian kid in my class, and he always had a fairly blank expression. I wouldn't know if he was happy, sad, angry, etc., and I just assumed his entire race couldn't make facial expressions. One day I went to his house and his father greeted me with a similarly blank expression, but then his sister came out and gave me a huge beaming smile. I remember being shocked as I didn't think they could really do that, lol. Since then I had many Asian friends, co-workers, etc., and even a long-term girlfriend, so of course that belief is well and truly gone. In hindsight, I think my friend might have been on the spectrum. Wasn't really a name thing in the 80s, just a word of kids. He was incredibly smart, but I noticed the general lack of facial expression with him well into our teens. At 13, I was certain alcohol didn't affect me, some kind of genetic immunity. Tested the theory hard the first weekend my parents went away. Turns out, very much not immune. Watched my son do the exact same thing at 16. Apparently the immunity belief is hereditary, just not the immunity. I had a stay-at-home mom growing up, so I briefly believed that women didn't have jobs. Not that they couldn't have jobs, just that they didn't. This was stupid for a lot of reasons, but mainly because my teachers and my doctor were all women. My sister told me that dogs use eye contact to establish dominance, so every dog I met I'd start a staring contest with. I thought furries were a meme made up so people could hate at least something.